All right, so we got several people on here.
Welcome, everybody.
Couple of mics on. That's good. Mike Richardson's on here, even though he got hacked. He found his other Facebook account to get on.
Uh-oh. Dan Kerrigan just got hacked last December, and Facebook won't let him back in.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's
it was a whole ordeal.
Sometimes there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, he said, I don't miss it too much. So it's like, I guess I couldn't have gotten hacked at the same time, take a little sabbatical, if you will.
Right. Yeah, sometimes it's not a bad thing.
Right.
Well, I think we'll get started. Typed up a thing in the chat real quick for everybody. If you have questions and you want to be on video, by all means, raise your hand. We'll let you come in and talk with myself or Jim. And then if you don't want to be on video, you can also just shoot something up in the chat, and we'll be sure to try to answer that question and kind of go through that. So welcome to the first meeting of Firefighter Book Club. This is something that kind of spurred out of a couple of things. Me writing my book and kind of going through the trials and the tribulations of connecting with people and all that kind of stuff. And just because of all those authors out there, we're all kind of pushing ideas back and forth. And I go, we need to be able to connect a little bit more. So we're going to talk about a couple concepts in Jim's book, but also talking about creating the book and authoring. For those of you that are on here that are actually looking to become fire service authors, or some of you that already are, we got a lot of people in the book club that are already fire service authors, so they'll be able to give some insight as well as we go through this. Yeah, it's just been kind of a fun ride, and we'll see how it works out. But I'd like to introduce Jim Moss from Firefighter Success.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me, Jesse. This is a ton of fun, and thanks for everybody for coming and for the discussion. And it's fun to have something like laid back like this. So this is going to be a lot of fun, and no questions off the table. As I already told Jesse that, I'm an open book. So any question you have about the book or anything else, let me know. I'm game.
Okay. Well, you guys, like I said, type some stuff in the chat. I'm gonna get started here with a couple questions for Jim. So, and I'll tell you right now, like I had a lot of authors that I could choose from. Knowing from Firefighters and Fire Trucks Getting Ice Cream, Jim was a cold call. I had never met Jim before. I saw there's a lot of good things that are going out. Good friends with Jared Sergi. He was promoting the book pretty hard. Maybe it was like, hey, you promote mine, I'll promote yours kind of thing or something. But Jared,
I paid him like $5,000. It was worth it.
Well, yeah, I totally get it. But Jared's on here next month. So Jim was a cold call for me to go like, hey, it looks like you're doing some cool stuff out there. I want to bring it on the show. And I already told him this morning, it's really for the hair. But
and I'm jealous of your hair. But on the cold call, you were like, I don't want to start off with anybody big, so you're not too big of a deal. So I'll have you on first. But
that was not the case. It was, I see you're doing some good stuff out there. So one of the things we were talking about is so out of the book. Well, first off, how did you come up with the 20 C's in the first place? How did it work out?
Yeah, so back when I was writing for firefightertoolbox.com, one of the articles I thought about writing was called 10 C's to Firefighter Success. And so I just kind of held on to that, never published it through Firefighter Toolbox. And that was back in 2014, I believe, or 2015. So it's been sitting on the back burner for a while. So I got really involved with doing firefighter functional fitness in 2015. It got released in 2016, and that's kind of been my main focus for the last 5 years or so. But it's kind of funny, and I moved out to a slower station. Let's just call it our retirement station within our district. Not by choice, but I was the least senior captain on my shift, and I got kind of forced out there, and I wasn't excited about it, but I was like, just like anything else. And as I preach in the book, you make the best of every situation you're in. So I went out there. I was like, well, I'm still going to do my normal captain stuff. I still want to mentor and train my guys and train a lot and do all that. But with the other downtime I'm going to have at the station, I'm really going to focus on rehashing this idea, this article. And I was like, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to make my second book. So so 10 of the C's were already there, and I wanted to round it out a little bit more because I could go well beyond the confines of an article, right? An online article. I could make this into something. And I actually had it up to 25 C's, and I scaled it back down. But, some of the first 10 C's were, the foundational kind of ones like coachable, confident, committed, compassion, courageous. Those were kind of the foundational ones. And then I looked into other ones that I thought were also important for firefighters to achieve excellence. And so I rounded it out a little bit more. And so in 2019, both at home, both at work, and even on vacations, if I had an idea, I just wrote it down in my little Google Doc and on my outline and added to it. And so it would be sometimes 3 a.m. if an idea came and I wrote it down. And there were times where I only wrote for 5 minutes. There were times when I wrote for 3 hours, and so it's all a process. And so I wrote the basic manuscript in 2019, sent it to my editor, and he was working on it. And then I was really focusing 2020 on rolling everything out, getting the book cover design, getting the guts of the book and the layout designed in 2020, creating logos and starting up the Firefighter Success podcast. And I've been on plenty of podcasts, but I have never hosted a podcast. So that's a whole nother game and idea within itself. So I had to grow into that and practice what I preach, being uncomfortable and growing in that. But that's kind of the basic story behind it, is just, 2019 is when I wrote it, and that's how it all came about. And then 2020 is how I rolled it all out myself.
It's pretty amazing. Some people don't understand like how long it takes to write a book. I'm in the same boat. I've been working on mine for 5 years, and I still spend 5 minutes here or 3 hours there. Still.
Oh yeah, and it's kind of like a kid, right? For those of us who have a kid, you raise it all along, right? You raise this kid, but eventually you're going to have to say, okay, spread your wings and fly. You're on your own, and there's even stuff in firefighter functional fitness. I'm like, oh, I wish I could add this information or change this or whatever. And the same for firefighter success. There's always something you can add to your book, and when you self-publish like I did. It is a little bit easier if I see something like a grammatical mistake, I can always go back and send it to my layout guy. He can change it, and then I can republish it or, resubmit the draft, and it gets kind of resent out. But that's one of the nice things about self-publishing for sure. You don't have to go through the bureaucracy of a publisher and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, it is not a short, if you want to write a really, bad book, you could do it in like a week, and throw it out there. But I'm not that talented for those who can write really well and really quickly. But yeah, it's kind of like your baby, and you raise it and you want it to be the best it can possibly be.
Yeah. Well, I think, like you said, sometimes you just have to figure out, like, look, it's done. I'm going to just stop writing because I want to get the information out there and do that. So
for sure.
I didn't want to bring you on for firefighter functional fitness because there's a lot of guys out there that are on CrossFit. I'm on CrossFat, so I didn't want to.
I love it. Yeah, and then we would have just been doing a workout, so no one would have enjoyed that.
And so the podcast started after you put this book out?
So actually, right in conjunction, I released the first episode the same week I released Firefighter Success, the book. So yeah, I made sure that they coincided with each other. And it's fun because, I get to have some of the people who contributed to the book, like Dina Ali, Dan Kerrigan, John Spera, and others who have also done endorsements as well. I get to have them on podcasts, and, some of them are really good friends. Some of them are people who, I've never met before. But just like this, it's fun to share ideas and have these discussions.
Well, and the people that are in this meeting right now, there's guys that are on the job and there's guys that are into the job. And I think that anybody that's kind of filtering some of this stuff out, it's because they're into the job. So we're seeing that. You've had guests on your show, Frank Viscuso, Mark Van Oppen, a lot of people, and like I said, involved in the book as well. So us that are actually writing books, those connections are huge to kind of like be able to play stuff back and forth. So
for sure.
So out of the 20 C's, and I didn't even know it used to be 25, but What's some of the three C's? What would you say are three C's there that are probably like your prime ones in there that you talk about the most or influence you the most?
Yeah, so I started off the book with Coachable, and for firefighters and fire officers to be coachable all throughout their career. And as I've said before, the foundation to being coachable is being humble and humility, being teachable. And I think all of us can agree throughout our careers, the successful firefighters are the ones who are always willing to learn. They're the lifelong learners. They're out training, they're out learning new ideas, they're out researching things. They're the ones who are in a book, reading a leadership book or a tactics book or something like that. So being coachable, being teachable, being humble, that's why I started the entire book with chapter 1, because as we all know, ego is the enemy. Arrogance, pride, that's what gets in the way of our progress and our success, in my opinion. So there's that one. Another one I would equally say is the last chapter is coach. So being a coach, being a mentor, being a trainer to others in the fire service. And so that's why I started with being coachable, but also as we go throughout our careers, whether we got 5 years on the job or 30 years on the job, being a coach, being a mentor to others to keep that cycle going of producing, successful firefighters, if you will. So that's something I'm always passionate about. I love having, aspiring officers on my crew. I love having new guys on my crew. I've always loved training. I was an EMS training officer at my fire department, no longer hold that role, but I'm still active with, as a company officer, training my crew, and finding opportunities to do that. So I love doing that. And so the third C I would probably say is competent, which that chapter really focuses on being competent for the job, being good at your job, loving your job. Training is really important to me. So that was a really long chapter and it was kind of fun. I got to mix, hands-on training ideas. So I think there's like 101 hands-on training ideas that I just wrote a list out. And I told people at the end of the chapter in the action steps, I told people, hey, pick one thing or maybe even 3 things this month or 1 thing this week to put into action from the 101 hands-on training ideas. And then also blending the importance of within being competent, your education and learning from your experience as well. So, if I had to pick 3 of them, those would probably be it. So being coachable, competent, and being a coach to others.
Well, and as a company officer, like we both are, that being competent is obviously huge in setting the rest of the things in motion, right?
Yeah, for sure.
To be a leader, for you to be a successful firefighter, competency is definitely part of that.
Right.
Now, in the competency portion of that, right? What's the value of when let's say that there's something that you're maybe not competent completely in, or maybe not as confident in, where does that come up? Something that you might not have the best knowledge on, and how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think all of us can agree that we're kind of an all hazards fire service now, right? Especially my fire department, to where, we don't have separate truck companies and separate engine companies. And like, probably 80% of the fire service or more in the US, we do every job, as on the fire ground. And then you can throw in hazmat. You can throw in, we have TAC medics, we have swift water, we have, everything, all different kinds of shapes and sizes of sub-disciplines within the fire service. And that's one of the things I'm pretty honest about in the book. And they say to master your profession. Well, if we're doing all these different disciplines, I argue that you're not going to be able to master all of them. It's just impossible. But each of us has our own passion for these sub-disciplines, if you will. Like some guys like hazmat. I mean, they're the weird ones, but some guys like hazmat. And I'm technically a hazmat tech, but I don't enjoy being a hazmat tech. And there's just different things that we're all passionate about. I'm really passionate about fitness. So that's why I really, focus on that and train others in that and make sure I stay up on that for firefighter fitness. But also, I also go back to in the book is, rely on, go back and master the basics and learn about the basics and make sure you keep on doing that and rehashing them and through repetition. But whatever your passion lies in, make sure you kind of gear yourself in that direction and make sure you stay, if you can master that and be proficient in that, do that if you can. But I never think we're not going to be able to master every sub-discipline within the fire service. It's just not possible.
Well, even just the two basics of being a good firefighter and a good paramedic. I mean,
yeah, that's hard enough, right?
Yeah, I know a lot of good firefighters. I know a lot of good paramedics, but I don't know a lot of good firefighter medics. It seems like there's always a gap somewhere between those two, just because there's so much stuff to know.
There's so much stuff to stay current on, and that's the other thing is like some guys can really grasp, hold on to, and keep information, and it just stays in their head. And some other guys, it just kind of comes in, they learn it for, and they know it for a week, and then it kind of goes. But that's the other thing is we're all a team, right? And so when we're on a scene with, 3, 4, 6, firefighter medics, we all have to rely on each other because, there's someone, as Frank Viscuso says, the best idea has to win. So right. Someone's going to have the best idea on the scene, and that has to win. And we need to make sure that our ego doesn't get in the way of that.
Yeah, and keeping that in check. I'm not a hazmat person. I'm going to look at whoever is that day and go, "What do you want me to do?"
Hey, you, tell me what to do.
Right, and then watch their eyes get really big. It's like you're the hazmat tech. Yeah, but
I might be the captain, but I'm going to rely on you for your expertise and your knowledge in this particular area.
Well, the other one is if you're honest with them and you're honest with yourself that, hey, I'm not the expert in this. It's gonna go a long way. What about like making a mistake in front of your crew when you start talking about competency? How do you flip that? How do you actually make that into where you're?
I think the most important thing, and I'm sure you'll agree, is just owning it. Owning it right away as quickly as possible. And that comes back to your level of humility, right? So there's plenty of times like, I've given read the CAD directions wrong or something, and everybody has, and I've told them to turn right or go this way, and maybe we've gone the wrong direction. So, you got to own that right away and fix the problem and learn from it and do your best to make sure it doesn't happen again. And if you screw up a little bit worse with your crew or whatever, make sure that you be like, "Hey guys, I'm sorry. I really screwed up and we should have done this better." And I think that's going to build, more credibility. You may have, been humbled a little bit from your mistake, but I think it's going to build more credibility with your crew, being like, "Hey guys, I screwed up." So, and that might be something to where they learn from too, the next time they make a mistake, because we're all going to make mistakes. So the next time they make a mistake, hopefully they'll do the same thing as well.
Yeah, and it's also when you look at, I was going out and training with my crew not too long ago. We're doing 2.5 to hose up to the second floor of like a 2-story strip mall, and we're flaking it all out and shouldering the hose, and I'm out there. We're out there with the probationary firefighter, and he starts off with the nozzle, starts shouldering some hose while I go pretend like I'm doing a hot lap 360. And I come in about 150 feet into that 2.5, and I start shouldering the hose behind the firefighter to go up the stairwell. And I figure out that I actually shouldered it backwards. So it's going to pay off upside down.
Oh, okay.
So now I'm kind of hand flaking the hose, up the stairwell.
Right.
And my normal thing is we train in the streets from 9:30 in the morning till 11:30. I kind of, hey, we're going out and training. We're going to go out and hit the streets and do that. That's kind of my philosophy. And at the same time, it's also where our call volume is low. So we're out there doing that. And of course, I screw this thing up. And I tell the crew, I'm like, "Okay, I screwed that up. We got to do it again." And it's like 11:30. And of course, my engineer.
Come on, Cap.
It's lunchtime, right? And it's like, no, we got to do it again. I screwed it up, So, yeah, being humble, owning it. But at the same time, it also brings in some stuff where your crew understands that you're not infallible, that you can make.
Oh, yeah.
And possibly even bring up, if you're going down the wrong path, if they think that you can't make mistakes, it might lead to a bigger problem in that
right.
management.
For sure. And I'm sure they learned from your specific example of how to not pick up the hose or how to pick up the hose correctly and shoulder it correctly. So it pays off, the top of, I'm guessing you had a Minuteman style. So yeah, it flakes off correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Out of the 20 C's, do you think that there's one that you struggle with?
Yeah, there's 20 that I struggle with. No,
I mean, it's not in there. That starts with T, so I know.
that's right. No, and I'm open about this. I talk about it in the chapter. And so there's two things I mainly struggle with. One is patience. So I talk about patience within the compassion chapter, and the other thing is compassion. I think we can all get that compassion fatigue if someone we don't believe is worthy of our service, or it might be the drunk who spits on us, or it might be someone who is stinky, smelly, belligerent, whatever. It's hard. Those are one of my struggles, to have that compassion. I mean, and I'll be honest, I do not like responding to or running site calls. I don't know who does. Some guys do, and they're really good. They're really good at, and they might be a little bit of the crazy ones who know how to deal with those kind of patients. But that has never been my strong suit, of having compassion for those who, I don't have patience for. And I'll be honest about that, but that's something I'm working on. And as it goes for patients, both at the Firehouse and at home, like just this morning, I'll be honest, I struggled with, not getting good sleep last night at the Firehouse, woke up really early for a call, never went back to sleep, came home, and I wasn't the most patient with my family. And so I definitely had to swallow a piece of humble pie and ask for my wife's forgiveness for something I shouldn't have said, the way I shouldn't have said it. So she was very gracious to me. So yeah, patience and compassion are definitely the ones that I struggle with the most, and I need to grow in, and maybe someone else out there listening is the same way as me.
Well, you literally walk in the door and you're like, look, I got the book club, and then I'm doing my podcast this afternoon. Like,
yeah,
you probably set yourself up.
Slow your roll, Jim.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about the compassion for some of our customers that we run on, and one of the best things I got one time hanging out with Chief Bernasini. Obviously all of us that are embedded, we understand the customer service model and how Bernasini pushed that out. And he told me a story about, they were probably 3 or 4 years into the customer service mantra and the educational piece of it. And he's at the downtown at headquarters, and a newer firefighter on the job, a couple years on the job, sees him as he's walking through the hallways. And of course, Bruno's always like, he makes everybody feel like, they're definitely right. Doesn't matter how long you've been there,
Yeah.
So this firefighter's walking through the hallway, and Chief Bernasini says hi to him and asks him some question, how's family and things like that. But somewhere along the line, they got on the topic of the customer service model. And this firefighter says, hey, I love what we're doing. I'm all for it. But I work at the downtown station. I see customers that are beating their own children. I see customers that are doing drugs and certain things like that. And he says, how do I at the downtown station give that added value that we're talking about?
Yeah.
And Chief Bernasini basically replied with like, look, added value is added value. We don't have to do that on every call, but you still have to be nice. You still have to treat them with respect and patience and kindness, the stuff that he always talks about there. And we have some pretty substandard customers we go to in a lot of our areas of my fire department. And your goal is to just not become a mercenary and run calls like we're just going in there to just get business dealt with.
Yeah, not check the boxes.
Right. We have some areas that we have a lot of transients and we rolled up on a park bench sleeping the other day, and my engineer's laying on the horn. I'm like, we don't do that here. Like, we're going to get out, we're going to go up, see how he's doing, see if he needs water,
see if he needs Narcan, whatever.
Right. Whatever we got to do. But sometimes we get to that where it's like, well, they're bothering me. It's like, you're running calls. It is what it is, And
you're here for 24 hours or 48 or whatever.
I still do a pretty good job of making a living and running those calls, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, and I think it comes back. I had a great conversation with Chief Jason Hovelman. Is just like what he values the most in aspiring officers and his current officers and I'm sure with his firefighters as well, is empathy. I mean, empathy and being able to have that compassion, that sympathy, placing yourself in someone else's shoes. It's funny, like, we go to house fires, and, it's pretty rarely that we do get to do our job on the fire ground, right? We're usually, running EMS calls, doing automatic alarms, maybe some vehicle wrecks. But when we go to working fires, we're kind of like, oh yeah, we get to be a firefighter and do our job. And then, that's someone's house. That's someone who just lost, probably everything. And so we need to make sure we keep that perspective. We keep that empathy after the fire is out. We need to make sure we're not high-fiving in the front yard and smiling too much. Yes, maybe we made the push. We put the fire out. We did our job well. We may have even made a rescue. But to make sure that we keep that perspective, we keep that empathy is really important.
Yeah, well, you talk about not smiling too much. Like literally the other day, I'm on shift and we're just driving back from a call, and I'm just like looking out the window of the cab of the engine, just smiling. And I told my guys, I'm like, I can't believe I get to do this job. Literally, we're driving a fire engine, going and helping out people. And
it's that nice weather on the West Coast.
The windows were down because the air conditioning wasn't working great.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, but it's like I spent some time with some of my family at Easter, and my nephew's getting ready to go to like this aeronautical engineering program at college, and then that's what he's going to do for a career. And I'm like, that I couldn't do something like that. I just like I got to be out and about and doing different stuff.
Yeah, one of the reasons I became a firefighter, I didn't want to have a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job, and I'm sure a lot of us on this call can agree. Is I can't be behind a desk all day. I got to go out. I got to meet people. I got to be in changing environments. I like hard work. I like to labor. So, and I'm sure everyone agrees, that's one of the reasons why we chose this job.
Yeah. So hang in with me with you guys. If you guys have some questions, like I said, put them in the chat or I'll let you come on. I got another one that I want to ask, and it's the different C, the COVID C that we're dealing with.
You're right.
How do you think that has affected your leadership ability? Or has it? Because I know I've been struggling with it in a couple of places that I'll talk about, but are you seeing anything where COVID's making it a little bit more difficult?
Where we are at in St. Louis County, the restrictions are starting to ease up, and definitely within my own fire department, since we're probably almost 100%, if not 100% vaccinated, all the firefighters. So within the firehouses, we were wearing masks. There was a point to where it was a month or more to where we were supposed to be isolating in our own rooms, not eating together, all that kind of. So that was hard from a leadership and a morale perspective, because we all know as firefighters, the kitchen table, the workout room, the, training on the bay floor, whatever, as human beings in general, we're not meant to be isolated. And especially as firefighters, we're not meant to be isolated. And so that can cause, some damage when it comes to morale and your culture and your momentum that you're trying to keep going with your crew. We weren't allowed to go do hands-on training down at our training tower. So that kind of stuff is hard, but in the same light, you find ways to be creative. You find ways to, communicate differently. Every difficulty is just an opportunity, well disguised, right? So it depends on your mindset and how you're willing to play that out. But I think everybody can agree that, the restrictions and different things going on with COVID are definitely making it more difficult, but not impossible within, your four walls of your fire station.
Right. Yeah, I struggle with the same thing. And we always talk about, with you get to discuss leadership. Leadership is easy when times are good. It's when it's bad that, and like you said, I'm locked up in my room. The true continuity is a problem. We're literally seeing each other on the fire engine and then dispersing back. And the sad thing is there's fire companies out there that were doing that before COVID.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
it's that culture, like, look, we need to spend time as a family watching TV and getting at the kitchen table. And now COVID's basically like pushing that even more. So and it can be difficult, but I love that what you were saying about leadership, and the quote I always identify with is when things get hard is smooth seas never make a skilled sailor. So it's supposed to be
difficult. It's, there's supposed to be difficulties in your leadership and your crew, and you got to learn from them and hopefully make it better.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anybody got some questions out there? Otherwise, I'll keep moving stuff along here. But I wanted to
any questions?
all of you guys. A lot of comments. I don't know if I got any questions yet. Anybody want to pop in?
Thanks, Phil, for enjoying the Firefighter Success podcast. I appreciate it. It's his Monday morning go-to. That's awesome. Thank you.
All right. So let's talk about the action steps, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of each chapter, you have action steps in there. And I think a lot of us nowadays, when we're reading books, we want to kind of see maybe that workbook type of influence. So when you started putting that together, how did that change the dynamic of just writing the book itself?
Yeah, so that's one of the things, the action steps at the end of each chapter. That's one of the things we did with Firefighter Functional Fitness when Dan Kerrigan and I did that. So we wanted to make tangible action steps at the end of each chapter. I mean, it's great to read something. It's great to hopefully absorb it. But just like anything else, you can believe something, you can read it, you can learn it, but it doesn't really mean anything until you take action, whether it's your fitness or whether it's, with Firefighter Success, personal leadership principles. So that's why I had some, very tangible things at the end of each chapter with the action steps. So, like in chapter 1, I believe I had stuff like, have a moment of introspection. Do you ask yourself and identify, do you need to be more humble? And some of us can say yes, some of us can say no, whatever,
No, don't understand that they're not humble. So
yeah. Well, I love when John Sparrow of Fit to Fight Fire, he says, there's two kinds of firefighters, those who are humble and those who are about to be humbled. So that's a true statement. Goes the same for leadership as well. So going back to the end of chapter 1, Coachable, finding a mentor, that's incredibly important to be coachable, and then just taking every step you can to learn from every situation. So that was really important to me. And one of the chapters I really identified with, and I hope people put into action when they read it, was all about conviction. So knowing what you believe, why you believe it, and then there's different exercises within the conviction chapter of making sure you do a personal strategic plan. So what is your mission or purpose in life? And not necessarily for the fire service or your fire department, but what is your own personal mission in life? What is your vision for yourself? What are your goals? What are your core values? And I think so many times people just wander aimlessly through their lives, not knowing what they believe or why they believe it, or not having established core values. And do you necessarily have to write it out? No, I mean, you don't have to, but everybody should know what they believe and why they believe it. And they should have goals, that they're striving towards.
Well, we kind of brought up this morning too, is, a lot of times this isn't new information. The stuff in your books, sometimes we just need reminders,
Oh, I didn't make everything up. I didn't learn it all and share all those principles. You mean they were already established?
Right. So a lot of times, and it goes back to another C, complacency. We get complacent, and sometimes it's the ones that have been on the job for a while that the more experience you have, the more complacency you can get, because it's like, well, I already know that. You get to that.
Or why do I need to know this?
The unconscious incompetent. I don't even know that I have a problem.
Yeah.
I think that even books like this, as a company officer now for 15 years, it's just those memory joggers or maybe the jabs of like, hey, you need to get back into doing this again or better at doing this. And
that's one of the things I'm pretty honest about in the book is that, I didn't invent these principles. I've learned them from multiple areas of my life, whether it's my faith, whether it's from the mentors I've had, whether it's from my positive experiences, whether it's from my mistakes and negative experiences, whether others have just taught me or I read them and applied them to my own life. So I'm pretty honest about that. And I'm also honest about the fact that I'm not a perfect example of everything that's contained in the book. I'm a work in progress, and I need to, work on my patience and my compassion as well. So.
Well, you brought up your faith. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of it that goes into that.
Yeah, for sure. And, yeah, I'm pretty open about my faith, and that it's, one of the, if not the main priority and thing that's most important in my life, and then comes my family and the fire department, and, fitness is important too. Those 4 F's, right? So, yeah, so those are all very important to me. Yeah, so those are all really important.
Well, if every conversation we're going to have is about 20 C's and 4 F's and everything's a letter, we're going to.
Well, it's the fire service. We have to have an acronym for everything, and I've always been a fan of alliteration. So the more C's, the more F's, the better.
Well, you're literally talking about the slab savers guy as far as an acronym.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's make an acronym that pisses everybody off. It works really well to call.
Oh, that's pretty easy in the fire service. So, yeah.
Right. So a long time for you to actually write the book. It took a while to do that. Let's talk about the writing concept for those of that are on here that are looking to write. And like I said, I had some mentors that helped me out with that, even a kick in the pants. Anthony Castros literally was the one that, we were talking about the concept of strategy and tactics for employee fires.
Yeah, cool.
As a class. And he's like, Jesse, you need to write a book on that. And I said, Chief, I don't have time. I'm running the training company. I got the kids at home. I'm working shift.
Yeah.
And I said, I was like, sometimes it's just hard just to come up with some magazine articles here and there. And
yeah,
he looked at me with just this straightest face and he goes, yeah, I got a training company. I'm working shift. I got a family at home.
Yeah.
Like, just
if there's a will, there's a way,
Stop procrastinating or being lazy. I don't remember what he said to me somewhere along, just get off your ass and start writing. And
yeah.
And that was in November of 2016.
Yeah.
I mean, we're literally going on 5.5 years now of writing this thing. But
yeah.
It was November. I came in for Thanksgiving for like a 72-hour shift. And I told my crew, I said, hey, holiday schedule for the next couple of days. I'm going to write a book or start writing a book. And they're
like, what?
Yeah, they just laughed, like, yeah, right, and hacked out like a chapter and a half.
You're like, no, I'm actually going to write about you guys, putting out your employee fires.
Yeah, I didn't tell them that till later. That came later on when I started doing the final editing. Like, hey, by the way, you're in the book, and I want you to make sure you read it before it goes out there.
Yeah.
So the process of that, it took a while. Tell us about writer's block or some of the things that you struggled with as an author.
Yeah, so one of the nice things was that, well, obviously, number one, I had already written a book, so I knew the process behind writing a book and what it takes to really devote yourself to it. And, first and foremost, you have to be passionate about what you're writing about, first and foremost, and hopefully knowledgeable. That helps too, that competence really helps. But for me, doing, since I went the self-published route, I didn't have specific deadlines, which can be a blessing and a curse in disguise, so it's a blessing in that I can take my time and really grow my child the way I want it to, and go back and rework things and all that stuff. But if you have deadlines from a publisher, then you have to, meet those deadlines and get it done within that time frame. So I really enjoyed the self-publishing route. And what I did was, like I said before, there were times, some days I'd write for 3 hours. And then there were times that I wouldn't write for a couple days or a week or whatever. And I just left it on the back burner. And I went back to it later and I had fresh ideas. I went back and thought about something differently and added a story or an anecdote or something like that. So that's what was nice. But it was kind of funny. It got in 2020 towards like August. And, we all, like you said, we all have busy schedules. I was busy with Firefighter Functional Fitness. I was busy with this and that. And I was just finding like, I am getting this book out before the end of 2020. And I'm starting the podcast before the end of 2020. And sometimes that's what you have to do. Like you said, you got to kick yourself in the pants and say, it's go time and we're going to do this. So I reared up and did that. But if anyone's like looking for specific advice on, how to write a book or how to start the process, is just start, whatever your title or topic is, obviously that's the most important thing. what you want to communicate. But, starting a little outline, like for me, the 20 C's were my 20 chapters. I knew I wanted an introduction before that. I knew I wanted to include action steps for people to take action afterwards. But I just broke it up into those 20 chapters and wrote them individually. They kind of stand alone. I mean, they relate to each other, but they also stand alone. They can stand alone as well, which is what's nice about my book. It wasn't like I was writing a novel and it had to be, something that was a continuous flow all throughout. But really, I would just say some progress is better than no progress. Just start writing, start doing something, adding your ideas. I remember even just on my phone, adding to my notes section in my phone, just adding ideas in there. And then I would take it and add it to, I wrote everything in Google Docs. So I could access it anywhere online, and I could always add an idea, whether it's 3 a.m. or whenever it is, I can add an idea. So that's how I like doing it. And then I could also share with like Dan Kerrigan, my partner in crime with Firefighter Functional Fitness. I could have him be my technical editor, review stuff, and share with my editor for his proofreading and all that stuff. So, reach out to me, anyone who's thinking about writing a book or in the process, and any help I can give, I'm more than willing to help you. And, there's one thing of writing the book, right? And one thing putting it out there. And then there's the whole nother aspect of marketing it and getting it to where it's reaching people, and people who are actually buying it and reading it and sharing it with their friends. So that's a whole nother completely different aspect about it, especially when you're self-publishing. But even if you're not self-publishing, even if you're going through Penwell or someone else like that, you still have to market your own book as the author pretty much nowadays. And so, the Firefighter Success podcast is one of the avenues that really helps me do that, to keep, it fresh and relevant. But a lot goes into it, but I'm an open book, no pun intended, if people want to ask me any question about that, either here or offline as well.
Yeah, and it's I got the second kick in the pants, actually, like you said, that. So Jared Sergi's book came out.
Yeah.
That's it. I got to get mine done. And
Yeah.
I think there was a long period of time where I stopped writing, got busy with other things, and Jared's book comes out, and I'm like, oh, he's killing me right now. So.
And that's good, is, with Jared's coming out, mine coming out, and books will come out, and, some of the stuff might be the same topic or subject matter as yours or someone else's or whatever. And that's okay. We all have unique perspectives and different things to say, but it's good that we have that positive peer pressure in this community within ourselves to be like, okay, they got theirs out. I need to get mine rolling and get my book out as well.
Right. Were you using Amazon templates or
what I did was, so I obviously wrote it in Google Docs, but then, so I published through Kindle Direct Publishing, which is basically Amazon's publishing services, and you can submit different formats to them. But what mine is basically a PDF submitted to them. As you can tell, my book has a very unique layout with the photos, and it has some different graphics and logos in it. So I knew I had this vision all along of how I wanted the book to look in each chapter, especially the beginning of each chapter to lay out. So if you need a good graphic design guy, let me know. My guy's awesome. So
yeah, I think that's the kind of the hardest part, is kind of messing with the formatting and how you're going to do it.
Yes.
How'd you come across the photographer you're using?
So Chris Smead, he's in California, and he does a lot of great work with San Jose Fire Department. And so I'd actually been using a lot of his photos with Firefighter Functional Fitness as motivational type posts for social media. And I've always loved his stuff. And so I just reached out to him. I was like, hey, here's an opportunity for both of us. I love your work, and I think your photos are really, perfect for each of these different chapters. And I sent him, what I was thinking for each chapter. And then, in return, I was like, hey, we get to feature your work and kind of work together in all this. And he was all for it. He was very gracious and letting me use his work.
Yeah. And I was looking at that. I was like, Chris is in California.
Yeah. How'd you connect with this guy? The power of social media, right?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So
nice. We got some good comments in here. We got one guy said, what chapter spoke to everyone most? His was consistency. Yeah, that's a really important one. speaking to what you said before, is like, we can start out of the gate as being passionate and into the job, but, throughout a 30 year service, fire service career, that consistency can definitely wane off. And that's when we can become complacent. And one of my mentors, Captain Mark Moore, he's been on the job for almost 30 years now, and he is still one of the most passionate, engaged firefighters, officers I know. And like, I hope when I have another 15 years on, that I'm still as engaged and as passionate as he is. So he's a good example to me to stay consistent.
Yeah. Well, and we always talk about consistency as far as what do your firefighters want from their company officer?
Oh, for sure.
And there's two parts about that. Is number one, trying to be as consistent as possible for the things that matter.
Yeah.
But you also have to recognize, as that company officer, is you're not always going to be consistent based on who the players in the game are.
Right.
And that's the hardest part. Is they always want you to be consistent, but then it's like, well, am I treating, as long as you're treating everybody fairly based on what's going on, that's going to be the big thing. And that's what
for sure.
Together.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we as firefighters need to be consistent and have that, consistent trajectory throughout our careers, but we also, as leaders, as company officers, as chief officers, we need to be consistent in how we play the game or live out the rules and apply discipline or whatever it is. We need to be consistent across the board. And firefighters just want to know what to expect. They want to know what to expect for you. They want expectations. They want to know their daily agenda. Like, I worked with a guy who was always like, what are we doing today? What are we doing today? Not that it was like affecting his day. He just wanted to know what we were doing, when we were doing it, because it was just a mental, something that was mentally important to him. Every shift, we work 48 hours, 48 on and 96 off. And so at the beginning of every 48, we have this whiteboard in the kitchen, and I write down our daily agenda. And I'm probably the only company officer that does that at my firehouse or whatever, probably in the whole fire department. But I write down, the daily agenda, what time we're doing what, if we have PR, if we have training, if, what's on the, specific engine house cleaning list or whatever. Are we cleaning in the showers this rotation? Do we need to order station supplies? All those different kind of funny little things. So, at first they kind of make fun of me for doing that. But then if I don't write something on the board, at the beginning of the 48, at the beginning of the tour, they're kind of like, hey, what are we doing? What's going on? I need to know. And so they're like, they make fun of me for doing that. But by the same token, firefighters want to know what to expect and what the agenda is.
Yeah. They don't want to be the last one to know that they're going to a school tour 5 minutes before you go out and get on the fire engine to go to school.
Exactly. No one likes that surprise.
It's funny. We had a company officer that works at one of our slower stations and came to work in overtime downtown, and kind of like you, he wrote up everything on the board, like, hey, from this time to this time, we're going to work out. And from this time to this time, we're going to do this. And this is a really busy house, running 30 calls a day. And I'm getting ready to leave, and I watch him writing all this stuff down, and he leaves the room, and the engineer just laughs and erases the entire board and just writes calls on there, like, we're going to do one thing today. We're going to run calls. Apparently,
we're going to do our job and respond to calls.
That's all we do here. That's our main mission. So knowing your station, knowing your people, that's also part of being consistent. So
for sure. We got Michael Fleming. He said conviction was an incredibly important chapter to him since he dealt with so much negativity and being in corrections. He says it really reminded him of who he was and what he wanted to be. So that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Michael. Phil said candid. He's a newly elected LT. So yeah, candid. I think so many times in the candid chapter, being direct, being genuine, being honest, being truthful. Those are all things that are incredibly important, especially as leaders. And he says he's a newly elected LT is it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. People want to know what to expect, right, from their officers. And I think communicating and being candid with what's going on is incredibly important. Too many times I've worked under different officers who are maybe passive aggressive, or they don't really tell it like it is in a kind way, in a tactful way. too many times, they're not being candid and they might be sugarcoating something.
I don't even do passive aggressive. I'm aggressively passive.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to steal that.
And he even brings up the new lieutenant. I mean, that's even more of that thing as a new officer, being candid and being consistent, because you have to lay the foundation of what your expectations are.
For sure.
As a company officer for 15 years, there's not too many firefighters that don't know, whether they've even worked with me or not, they've heard or whatever, they work overtime with me, they're going to understand what I expect. But as a new officer, you got to kind of lay that foundation and those ground rules so that they understand what your consistency level is.
Yeah, exactly. And making sure you're living out that consistency as their leader, as their officer.
Yeah. And we kind of talked about like leading when times are hard. COVID is definitely part of that. And some of us are actually dealing with a major financial piece of the COVID problem right now. So one of my favorite stories is there was a time at a previous fire department, we're going through some financial issues, and our fire chief came to all of us and said, "Hey, I can't even believe I'm asking you guys to do this, but for the next 2 months, we're like out of money. We had to transfer all the money to payroll. So for the next 2 months, if you can just bring in some toilet paper, some dish soap, laundry soap, whatever, just to get us through this hurdle until the next fiscal year."
Yeah.
And, at the beginning, all of us are like, "Of course, chief, no problem. We'll take care of it." And for 2 months, we're using Charmin instead of the sandpaper that we normally have in the bathroom stall.
Right.
And
you're like, what are you spending your stimulus money on? Charmin for the firehouse.
Everybody's buying toilet paper anyway.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, 2 months later, the talk at the kitchen table has changed to, "Can you believe the fire chief made us bring in our own toilet paper?" So you have to remember that that toilet paper in the stall doesn't motivate you to be a good firefighter. If you go in there and there's toilet paper, that's not going to change anything. But if you go in there and there's not toilet paper, that's going to demotivate you. So a lot of times when you go through that leadership, it's not necessarily all the time the motivators, but the maintenance factors to keep your people motivated.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the great questions I got from one of my LTs, a good friend at my fire department, one of the questions I got from him is, how do you create momentum and how do you sustain momentum? So he was asking for himself. He was also asking for it as like a team. I was like, that's a great question, because different people are motivated by different things, right? And so it's, especially at the company level, it comes down to really knowing your people and what motivates them on a personal level. Some guys hate fitness, some guys love fitness, some guys like to train, some guys don't. So you got to find what motivates each person and stay consistent with that. And like you said, there are going to be certain things for certain people that if they're lacking or not there, that is going to be a huge morale killer, like not having toilet paper when you really need it.
We had toilet paper, it's just better toilet paper.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing when you start talking about that is, it's funny, like you'll ask that question to a new company officer on an oral interview panel, like, how do you motivate somebody that's unmotivated? And it's the answer where it's just like, well, I stay motivated. Well, yeah, that's great, but that doesn't motivate everybody. You need to know, you need to connect with your people and know.
How do you coach the uncoachable? How do you lead the unleadable? I don't really believe that, no one is unleadable. Everyone needs to be led, and everybody wants to be led, even the firefighters who say they don't want to. So yeah, how do you do that? And that's the $1 million question, right? And everybody's different, and how, especially as leaders, that you need to interact with those people. And that's another thing, we can go down we can do a deep dive on leadership, yeah. Right? But that's the interesting thing is that, working towards a promotion, if you're a firefighter going to a company officer or working towards that company officer position, you think about knowing your strategies, your tactics, your rules and regs, your fire department guidelines, all these different things that you're studying and doing, and you're going through all these fireground scenarios and you're doing all this. Well, it's kind of funny because, that is probably about 10% of your job. It's important. It's a very important part of your job as a company officer, but then putting it like, your book that you're working on, those employee fires are those employee difficulties. Those are what you're tested and how we as company officers definitely grow, learning from those experiences of how to deal with those, and being humble enough, if you haven't dealt with something, you don't know how to deal with something, asking those who are more experienced on how to deal with those things, other company officers who have been there before and gone through it.
Right. And it's the reason why I'm writing a book, and it's the busiest class I do, because you're going to deal with way more fires in the firehouse than out on the street.
For sure.
Yeah, like you said, it's 10% of your job, learning how to actually size up the building construction out there, when the building construction in your firehouse is what affects you the most. So,
yeah, what's within your own four walls. Yeah.
Let's see if we got anybody else. We want to try to, like I said, get this out there for you guys to participate.
Any question whatsoever. I like the conversation though, so it's good conversation going on.
Another one on consistency here. The random quotes. Let's talk about that.
So yeah, it's funny. I just listened to one of my good friends and a guy who I really look up to, Andy Starnes. He was just on the Crew First Culture podcast, and he talked about leadership. And he's like, leadership isn't a bunch of quotes. Leadership is action, and making sure you're taking ownership and having accountability with your people and building those relationships. But the quotes part, I almost took offense to, because quotes really inspire me. People's ideas and what they say really inspires me. And I was writing this book, and I had all these quotes that have inspired me, and I'm like, there's probably too many quotes in here, but I'm just going to put them in here anyway. And if people don't like it, they can just skim over it, kind of a thing. But yeah, every chapter started off with a quote that kind of was the main idea of the chapter. And then all throughout each chapter, little quotes peppered in there. Because like I said before, I didn't come up with all these ideas, these principles. That I learned them from someone else, and it's how I've applied them to my own life, and how I'm preaching to myself basically, from what others have taught me. So that's why I had a lot of quotes. They inspire me, and hopefully they inspire other people as well.
Well, and you got everything in there, ranging from Thomas Edison to all kinds of people. But
I got preachers in there. I got historical figures in there. So
Frank Vescuso is both historical and a preacher. So
that's right. A legend.
Right. And the funny thing is, we talk about leadership, and leadership is about influence. And I always, one of the discussions I always have is that we see leadership in the military a lot of times. That's where a lot of the good leadership stories come from. And it's not that they were, are they made leaders? Are they born leaders? It's because they were put in positions that they had to lead. When you're in war, and you have to inspire people. A lot of that leadership and influence to say, hey, we're going this direction. And if you turn around and nobody's following you, it's because you haven't inspired them to want to follow you.
Yeah.
And some of those inspirational quotes, like you're talking about, it's part of the direction.
Right. Yep.
So that keeping it inspiring, it's sometimes it's tough. It's like, you can't inspire your people like, hey, we got to clean the toilets today. It's the times when you're under fire that you're inspiring your people and getting that influence out.
For sure. And I think the other part is knowing your audience. So I'm not the kind of guy I love quotes and they inspire me, but I don't necessarily write them on the whiteboard at the beginning of every shift, because I don't think that would inspire or motivate my firefighters. But like I said, knowing your audience, when it's my book and people, that's my audience, then I can include them in there. Because if something has motivated or inspired me, hopefully it does the same for other people as well. Looks like we have another question from Mike, I think. Could Jim talk about the references that he used for the book? Does he have a list that he can share? Mike, I don't know if you can turn your audio on or not to clarify your question. So I put additional resources at the end of the book, but I'm not sure what references you might be talking about.
Down, I think.
What's that?
You want to come into the meeting?
Come on, we need more people. I want to see your smiling faces, everybody. Or at least hear your audio.
We'll see what he says. Maybe he'll type up like, I don't know. I know he likes. He's been on video before. You can't.
Oh, he said he can't unmute. Can you unmute him?
I asked him to unmute.
We got it now?
There you go. We hear you.
Okay.
Are you in your
Yeah, what I
underwear?
was,
Video because you're in your underwear?
oh, I didn't know if you can do that too, but
Yeah, you want to unvideo yourself? There he is.
There he is. What's up, man?
hey, good to see you guys. Great,
You-
great so far. What I was trying to get at there, Jim, was like you were referencing the quotes. I tried to look some of those up to kind of get more idea on where they came from or what's the background. Because like, you know, in a book, a lot of times you'll have like a list of references or footnotes.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know if you had anything because I think a lot of those are great and I'd like to learn more about them, but finding the source, I wasn't having any luck.
So if a source was attributed to them, I put that source in there. But if there was not a source or a name behind it, that was my quote or my idea. If that makes sense. So I didn't want to write my own name after the idea or the quote that was there. It might have been taken from the body text and just, you know, put out as a bigger standout quote. But if there's no, if I don't know who it was, I put anonymous or unknown.
Okay.
And if that's not there, then it's my quote within the book. So, and otherwise, as an author, I did my best to attribute all possible quotes that I knew who it went to.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Good question.
Anybody else want to come on camera today?
Got some good looking guys here, you know, a good looking group.
I just got to spend some time with Mike. The ISFSI just had their credential training officer. And
Oh, good.
Mike went through that together. So we ot to see each other on Zoom like every week for a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's good stuff.
With a great mustache comes great responsibility.
Totally get it. Totally get it.
Yep. Anybody else? Anything else? I love it.
Yeah. It's regal, right? It's regal. Well, yeah, unless there's nothing else, we're coming up on the hour. We're going to wrap up. So if anybody else has another question or comment for Jim, our next month's meeting is with Jared Sergi. So we're get to reading. That's the other great thing that's coming out of this book club is it's kind of forcing me to continue to read those books instead of just having them on the shelf looking pretty. Actually, Mike Richardson's one of the big proponents. We even throw out there like some of the old books that are out there, and unfortunately, we can't use them for the book club because they're no longer published. But man, I'd love to use the Book of Andy or some of those other ones out there that are some great reading topics. But I think we're going to keep it flowing for the next year. I'm already getting a huge reading list for 2022 already, so I think that's one of the biggest things for all of us is keeping us moving along.
Awesome. Well, thanks. And if anyone has any questions or wants to connect with me, you know, the email is firefightersuccess@gmail.com. That's the easiest one. If you want to connect with me through the website, firefightersuccessbook.com. I'm on all social media, so you can also reach out to me there too. I love sharing ideas. I love hearing from people. So I'm just here to learn and just as everyone else is. So I'm grateful to be here. Yeah,
and he's wrapping up this, and shortly after he's going to be doing recording his podcast today. He's got Gary Ludwig coming on, which is also one of our guests on the book club later on. So he's kind of doing a dual role effort today. And
that's right. A lot of recording today.
Yeah, recording, and then Gary's episode will be out in like 2 weeks or so.
Yeah. Yep. I got an amazing story coming out on the Firefighter Success podcast. A guy named A.B. Turin who lost 150 pounds at the age of 40. So his story is awesome. So that's coming out this Sunday. And then after that, Chief Gary Ludwig will be talking about his book, Fully Involved Leadership. Not too much. I don't want to give too much away.
Well, you can talk to him about other stuff outside of the book too. You know,
okay.
Book club, you can talk about all kinds of other fun stuff that Gary loves to talk about. So
that's right. Cool.
All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up like Jim's saying. If you want to get in touch with him or us, by all means. Other than that, we'll see you next month for Jared Sergi.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks, Jim.